We are used to using the phrase introductions of bills, and they're making a point to have us use the proper vocabulary, which should be requesting a committee draft. So do we have any requests for a committee draft? Okay, I do have one, and it is 25 RS 0489. And it is on behalf of Phillips Fundamental Learning Center. And this allows them to get placed on the, it adds a tool to who qualifies for the at-risk funding sources. So if there is no objection, we'll consider that added. Seeing none? Okay, very good. I had a request for a point of personal privilege. Representative Steele, would you like to introduce your guests?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today we have the Flint Hills Regional Leadership Group that has been here at the Capitol, and it encompasses 5 counties in the Flint Hills region of Kansas. So thank you for being here.
Would you guys like to
go ahead and stand up, please? There they all are. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you for welcome to education, and thank you for being here and caring about one of the most important things we can do. Before we get on to the agenda, there was something that I learned this morning that I related to what we had on Tuesday, which was an answer to one of your questions about is this qualify for online or for continuous funding, and I invited Dylan to come and Dylan Deere to come. I'm sorry, I always want to pronounce your name incorrectly, and to answer that question, because it's always much better when an expert does. So Dylan, take it away.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So my understanding is that I was asked to talk about the Blueprint for Literacy and the appropriation for the Blueprint for Literacy. It's a little atypical, not totally uncommon, but a little atypical, because this money was appropriated as a single item appropriation inside of a policy bill and did not go through the regular appropriations process. But nonetheless, I mean, it's a $10 million appropriation. That happened last year for FY 2025. Okay, we have received the agency request, and now we have the governor's recommendation as of 10 a.m. this morning. For those expenditures, and they are included as part of the request for FY 2026 as part of the budget. There's nothing intrinsic there's nothing in the budget process that designates something as one-time spending or ongoing spending. All right, that is really agencies who are making that decision. We do attempt to track one-time spends for budget profile purposes. All right, but there's nothing in the budget that says you can't ask or for an expenditure in the future. This is included as part of the Board of Regents budget.
Thank you very much. So we would consider this part of their base budget, and it needs to go through the appropriation process. Is that a good way to look at it?
Madam Chair, that is correct. So this will go to the higher education budget, and this appropriation will be considered at that point.
Thank you so much for popping in and helping us out. I appreciate it. Do we have any questions for Dylan? Seeing none, we will get to the main attraction. You have received, I hope you all received, we uploaded it to the S Drive, and Michelle emailed out the plan. And if you recall from Tuesday, we kind of went through the different reports and all the different requirements of the bill. And we said there was the center plan that was submitted January 1st, and that's what we're here to hear. But you also got a second email from us, which also had the progress report that was due January 15th. So we sent that out to you since we had mentioned that on Tuesday, so I just want to call your attention to that. We're going to focus here on the Reading Center plan. And if we end up with extra time, Dr. Lane has indicated she's very willing to address any questions you have or to talk about the progress report as well. Dr. Lane, welcome to education. And I'll let you begin.
Thank you very much, Chair Estes and members of the committee. I'm thrilled to be here today. And I also want to express that anytime this committee needs clarification, wants me and my staff to come before you, we will make ourselves available because we know how important this topic is to you. I had a chance to listen to your introductions that you made the other day when you were meeting, and I thought, I'm coming before a group of Kansans who are highly focused on education and understand the importance of literacy. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I also want to recognize my colleagues that are here with us, the CEO of the Board of Regents, Dr. Blake Flanders, Chief of Staff, Kelly Oliver, and my colleague Rachel Rubio, who serves as the Senior Associate Director for the Blueprint. Rachel is the content expert on the team. She is trained in dyslexia, has deep knowledge in special education, has worked directly with training teachers that work with struggling readers. So she'll make herself available as well if you have questions specifically for her. So I thought how I'd organize my opening remarks before we get into the detail of the plan around these things. A why of the blueprint. Now, I know you had a chance to go through the actual legislation Tuesday, but set context for the why. Talk about the what and specifically how the centers fit into that big why. I really want to gain insight from this committee on how we improve the plan that's in front of you. We'll take that back to the advisory committee and ensure that your recommendations are responded to. And then, frankly, answer your questions. Because the questioning process will help us all deepen what we're doing in the work. So as a reminder, the blueprint was passed into law, as you know, last session and began July the 1st. And I want to talk to you today from the perspective not as a 40-year plus educator, retired superintendent, retired teacher, former member of the Board of Regents. I want to talk to you as a Kansan, as a auntie, as a great auntie, as a neighbor, as a sibling, as an individual who understands the challenges we face when we don't read well. It's significant. You all know that. Reading is the most important skill we develop as a human being. And reading is the underpinning of all other skills that we learn. And when we don't read well, life is just harder. And as an auntie who has many opportunities to see those young people grow and see them struggle, I understand personally what it means when you struggle and the resources may not be there to resolve it. As a former educator, Representative Wynn, you and I saw together every day children who needed different strategies and more support. So, and frankly, as an individual, as a kid who didn't learn to read till I was in the 7th grade, this goes to the core of service that I think we share. So I asked this committee to help me do the best job possible to lead this critical work. The primary investment that we can make that will help us drive the economy, fill the jobs that you all are bringing to the state, ensure the quality of life, and make sure that we achieve the goals, frankly, that every child learns to read and that every educator is equipped with the skills that they need to move this forward. So I come to you today from that lens, that perspective. So how did we get here? This is not a Kansas problem, a Kansas educator problem. We have a national problem. And you'll see in my written testimony, as I showed you, that we have about a third of our children in Kansas who aren't reading well. Our neighbors have the same, if not more. I analyzed how we were doing across the Midwest states in terms of children learning to read, and all of the Midwest states have 30% or more of their children not reading well. And frankly, the nation, there are spots where it's even more dire. So we got here in a lot of different ways, but one of the things that I believe that led us to this place is that we didn't have a deep handle on how individuals learn to read. We were following curriculum and methodology that was recommended by publishers who just didn't meet the mark. So as a young child, I was taught to read what I call flashcard reading. Do you remember that? Where we were asked to memorize a lot of words. That was hard for me. As an elementary ed teacher, I was taught whole language, and then as a practicing educator, vested a lot in balanced literacy. Those were aligned to what the science then said was the way to help a child learn to read. But we now know more. In our profession, science should inform our practice. We know much more. Just like science informs technology and medical, we know more. And we now know that those methodologies that we used in higher ed and that we use throughout the nation in our classrooms left many children without the skills to read well. So the current science is called structured literacy. So with your permission, I want to try to avoid us talking about the science of reading, because the science of reading is science about how our brains work and how someone learns to read. It's not the methodology. And that's where we need to shift. Our educators do a remarkable job. When we say this is what's best for students, they jump on that and move with that. And the structured literacy has only been available, that learning, since 2014. So we have many educators, like myself, if I were still in the classroom, who did not have the opportunity to be trained in structured literacy. Structured literacy, direct and explicit instruction until a child reached mastery. That's what that means. And it was identified first as being the best methodology for individuals with dyslexia, but the science has now told us that's what every child needs to, how they need to be instructed so they learn to read well. So we have a challenge in front of us. We have a third of our children that are struggling to read for a myriad of reasons. We have educators who want to do everything possible to meet the needs of their children, and that's where the blueprint is wanting to come in to partner with the great work that the State Department of Education is doing and the state board to provide and equip our educators with the tools, the methodology of structured literacy. And so the blueprint is a partner. That's a key thing to know about what is this blueprint thing. It's a partner to K-12 to make sure that every teacher has access to high-quality training so they can meet the needs of our kids. The blueprint is focused on post-secondary. Now, there are things in the law that you went through that you know clearly are K-12 things, but the primary basis was to say, we need our higher ed partners to step in and to do more. And under the leadership of Dr. Flanders and the Kansas Board of Regents, they have made literacy their #1 priority, recognizing that higher ed's job is workforce development. And there is no more important job than helping our educators have the tools they need for success in the classroom. So when you think about the blueprint, think about workforce development. Think about making sure our educators have the tools they need for success. Think about working collaboratively. It's going to take all of us. It takes partnerships between higher ed and K-12. It takes partnerships with you all. It takes partnerships with our community providers, with the Phillips Fundamental Learning Center, with the Reading Center at Pittsburgh State, with everybody to solve this problem. In the blueprint, there is lots of requirements, but I like to think of them in these kind of big buckets. There's an advisory committee, which Representative Estes is a member of. And that advisory committee is accountable for achieving those goals and directs the plans, makes recommendations on best practice, monitors, and adjusts as we go. They're key. That advisory committee, 15 appointed members by the legislative process appointments and agencies, and then I've added 10 other content expert types to that committee. So first bucket, advisory committee. That's our tool to make sure we're successful. The second is educator preparation, talking about what do we need to do different in our undergraduate programs, how do we better support teachers who are already in the classroom. So that's a big part of the blueprint. Designing courses, specifically in structured literacy, so that we have courses in our undergraduate programs that give our pre-service teachers the tools they need. So when they graduate, superintendents, school board members can hire them and know that they understand structured literacy. Fourth thing, and I heard a question about this on Tuesday, joint collaboration with the school board, between the school board and the Board of Regents, and how does that work to make sure that we are collectively leveraging our resources to move forward. And so I'd be glad to talk with you about what process is in place to make that effective and to work well. The fifth big bucket is accountability. Lots of reports, as you see, because in the last 2 weeks, you've received 2 major reports from us. Those are routine, that you'll get lots of updates from the blueprint, including you can be forecasted that the one at the end of the month will be coming that focuses on student achievement and what we're doing to ensure that no discredited practice, none of that old science that we were teaching is now being taught in schools. And the last thing are centers. That's why we're here today. So I want to take you to that plan. But Madam Chair, I'd like to pause to see if there are any questions about my opening remarks, and then we'll go right to that plan, walk through it, and I'd love to have your questions about the plan.
Thank you. When Dr. Lane and I planned how we would do this, we thought we would stop each section and let you guys ask questions as we go, because there's a lot of information. By the time you get to the end, you'll be asking yourself, what was I thinking? And so that's going to be our format, although I will also be keeping an eye on the clock, and if I get afraid that we won't get through all of the plan, I'm going to move us along faster. I'm really trying to balance getting everything out, but also allowing enough time for questions. So do we have questions for Dr. Lane? Representative Getz?
It's kind of personal, so if you don't want to answer, that's okay. But you said that you didn't learn to read until you were 7. I struggled with reading too, and I just wondered what was the things that really got that back on track for you? Because your opening testimony, I appreciated it because it was very personal. Yeah, and for things to work, they have to become personal to us, in taking action that lasts long enough to have an impact. So I appreciate your history in that, and just wondered if you would share any personal from how that journey went for you.
Yeah, I hope I don't get emotional. So
it's okay if you do. Yeah,
we should be emotional about this topic, right? It was 7th grade, actually. I went through all of elementary. Part of it was the methodology that was used at the time in my elementary school. Truly, it felt like I was supposed to memorize all the words in the world, because it was a lot of flashcards. And do you all remember that SRA reading where you read a paragraph and you had to answer? Oh, I still have nightmares about that. So it just didn't connect with how I learn. And the second part of that is, I wanted to be outside. Recess was my favorite subject, and I love movement and having hands-on and doing stuff, and it's just the way that the teachers at the time were teaching reading did not connect with me. So finally, a social studies teacher in my junior high spent time one-on-one tutoring to help me understand I could do it, give me confidence, and then help me understand how to break the language apart and to flow. And a lot of that was I'd read the assignments, and if I knew I was going to be called on the next day, I practically had that memorized, but it gave me confidence that I could do it. And then the final piece of that story is when I went to Pittsburgh State University and decided I wanted to be a teacher, a faculty member showed me for the first time, now I'm 21 years old, phonics. I had no idea there was this thing called phonics and how it worked. And I know that I am not alone in that story. So thank you for your question.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Representative Schmoy.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I'm wondering, are we already teaching the Blueprint for Literacy to teachers right now? And if so, how extensive is that? How long have we been doing that? Or is this brand new, just started?
That's a great question. So our universities will say they've been teaching this programs aligned to the science of reading for a long time. And that science was first known in the year 2000. And they are correct. Where we have to shift is to structured literacy, and that's the focus that our State Department has. So we have structured literacy in place. So you'll notice in the progress report a section that talks about in Senate Bill 438, by August 24, 1 month, 30 days after the blueprint went into effect, you all required that we reshape our Science of Reading 1 and 2 courses around structured literacy and have those in place in August. That has been done. Now, let me just add, part of what we need to now do is go deeper and ensure we're teaching with enough application and practice that teacher candidates can actually do it when they graduate. That's key.
Okay, is this style already being used in classrooms, functioning classrooms across Kansas right now?
Structured literacy is aligned to letters. So you hear a lot about letters training. Letters was built on structured literacy. And so, yes, we are working together to make sure our teachers have that. And then the blueprint's role is to add more. What more do we need to make that work? We have a lot more to do, but we're on the right road.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Brantley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, let me just tell you, I appreciate your mentioning of explicit direct instruction and that deep learning that we all appreciate, and so I like your alignment with that. Second thing, I absolutely agree with the time frame of probably where we came out of teaching, kind of the old Told a Story podcast, if you haven't listened to it, about Lucy Calkins and what we were told when we were teaching. It leads to my question. As we were talking here, on the pre-service candidates, is there an online piece for those students that are maybe online? And even now, we have a lot of candidates that are a long-term sub that maybe are in a classroom as the teacher of instruction and fulfilling that full classroom teacher while online taking coursework. Is there a plan for embedding that, maybe even an experientially based type method for them to get this while they're teaching so they don't slip through the cracks and miss that?
Yeah, that's a great point. And if you haven't listened to Told a Story, I recommend it. For educators, it'll have you jumping out of your chair saying, why didn't we know this? But so the undergraduate courses are in our public universities, the 6th Regent plus Washburn in place. And the whether they do those online or in person is really a decision for the university. Most of those are in person because they could require high levels of engagement from faculty. Those could be available to anyone that's currently in the classroom that maybe not be fully licensed. That's the kind of partnership, and I'm pointing back here because Dr. Lori Curtis is with us, and she and I are talking about how does the blueprint add and build to what they're able to provide. So we certainly need to look at teachers who may be not fully licensed, who are currently practicing, and what they need. They may need more than those undergraduate courses. In addition to that, you'll see in the progress report that we are in the final stages of developing a course called the Foundations in Structured Literacy that's designed specifically for practicing teachers. And we're making that available to all Kansas teachers. The blueprint has resources to pay the tuition so they can get graduate credit. And there's a coaching component so that we have a faculty member who's highly skilled in structured literacy available to coach. But you highlight there's so much that we need to do for folks that are currently in the field, paraprofessionals, support for ESOL teachers, special ed teachers. So we're just beginning, 6 months in. We've got some good things started, but we're going to need to build a lot more.
And let's save our specific plan questions as we march through the plan. We're just on the introduction. I've got a question from Representative McNorton, Ranking Member Stogsdill, Representative Hill, and then we'll get back to the plan.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. Real quick, your number 3 bullet point here, talking about course content complete and on 2024, March 2025. Are we on target for that?
Let me get
It's
where
on
you are.
page 4.
You're on the progress report.
Oh, did I get ahead? I'm sorry.
Yes, sir, but that's all right. And number 3, which is on page 4 of the progress report, that's another reason we put a hard copy in front of you. So, design and implement foundation. Yes, we are on track. That course, my colleague Rachel's leading that. We hope to be in front of the state board in March, and it will be offered in June.
Perfect, thank you.
And just a friendly reminder, we want to make sure we focus on the plan and have time for that because we'll bring Dr. Lane back for the progress report if needed. So we're going to prioritize the time very carefully. Ranking Member Stogsdill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to let you know, you said the magic word to me, phonics. That's, I taught second graders and third graders for 7 years in Shawnee Mission, and I based the whole thing, our whole school based it on phonics. And I never had one kid that did not finish at least a year ahead of their grade level at the end of their year. And it somehow apparently lost favor and seemed to disappear for years. And I'm ecstatic that it's being mentioned again. And I hope it's a very high integral part of whatever planning we go ahead with.
Thank you. It is. That's key.
Thank you.
Representative Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Lane, for that presentation so far. I'm sure we got a lot more. My question is a little bit around the structure of what you've talked about it to this point in time. I think you said 2000 is when we realized that structured literacy was, what was the date on that?
2014 is when it was developed.
2014. Okay, 2014 was the date that we started to realize that what we were doing wasn't working, right?
I'm not sure, Representative Hill, if that's when we realized what we were doing wasn't working. That's when a new option, a methodology that was highly improved came forward.
Okay, so this was research-based, coming out of academia, that there was something better out there.
The source of that, I'm looking at you, Rachel, coming out of the National Institute of Health researchers that research how we learn to read, then to the International Dyslexia Association, who are key with dyslexia. They recognize this is great for kids with dyslexia, but it also has now been proven to be the methodology we all need.
Okay.
Anything you need to clean up there? Okay, very good, thank you.
So the ensuing 10 years, from 2014 to 2024, we have validated that. Is that correct?
We are implementing that in our undergraduate programs. Now, the research is clear, and in my written testimony, you'll see that the research says that generally only a fourth of our teachers come out of the national programs for preparing educators. I'm stressing that because that was national data, not Kansas data, fully prepared. So 3/4 still didn't have enough skill. So one of the things I think we should look at is how much time do we need in application, internship like, focused on literacy. Student teaching is a great experience, but it's about everything. What do we need to make sure that our teachers have deep skill in literacy? And we need to relook at how much field experience. The other thing is to make sure that our teachers who are already in the classroom have this skill. So when our teaching candidates go out, they see it modeled, and they have the curriculum that's necessary. So it's all of those things.
So I'm kind of getting to the heart of my question here. I think all of us sitting around this room are absolute believers in the structured literacy approach. We are on board with that, or I felt that last year and this year as we talked about that. And I applaud that you immediately got course changes made in the teaching universities. That was part of something that was really important, was to get that done. My question is, if we have been going down this road for 10 years, and we're realizing that for lack of a better term, I'm going to use whole language. I'm just a stupid farm boy, so I don't know all the right terms. But using that term was not working. Why had university programs not started to change in advance of 2024? And how can we have any confidence that even though curriculum protocols are changed, that actual classroom teaching will follow what needs to be done to change from 33% not reading to 3% not reading?
My answer would focus on three things. The 2014 is the demarcation when structured literacy was identified as a methodology. It may not have been available to the field yet. Second thing is our university programs have been teaching structured literacy as evidenced by the passage rate of the exams that they have to take to be licensed in Kansas. I just heard a report on Tuesday, the board meeting, that the recent graduates had a 90% passage rate of that exam. And that's where the partnership is important, because KSD and the state board have changed the exam they use for licensure to a more rigorous exam. So you can have confidence that these were recent graduates, that they have the knowledge. The key that I think we need to focus on for the blueprint is, have they had enough experience implementing it with real children that they can walk into any Kansas classroom and know what to do? And do they have the curriculum materials to do this? So that's key. And I know, Chair, you want to get us to the plan, but I'll close my comment here with this. A teacher can have all the knowledge and skills he or she needs to implement it, but if they don't have the right resources in the classroom, it's not going to work. So one of the things we've got to make sure is that we vet highly the instructional materials so we know that what Kansas kids need, and we put them in place. And so working in partnership with KSDE, I think we can make some progress on that. And not get sold that story from a publisher who says this will work, when in reality, we now know we better check and verify that it actually does.
Thank you.
Thank you. And why don't we go ahead, as we discussed earlier, and start with page 5 of the plan. So you had Dr. Lane's testimony, then you had the plan. The first 4 pages are kind of a restatement of the executive summary you've already had, and then page 5 gets us into the meat of the plan. I am beginning to worry, because we only have a little less than an hour left of us having enough time to go through. So let's run through the first page. I think that's a pretty simple page. We'll pause for questions, and then we'll move to the next page. And some pages, I think, get more complicated than others. Please continue, Dr. Lane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on page 5, you see the vision and the mission of the centers. Now, keep in mind, this is the plan for the centers, and the centers are one part of the blueprint. They're not the whole thing. Just the shorthand, the purpose of the centers: to equip educators with ongoing professional learning in structured literacy, and to provide support to families with children who may be struggling. That support might look like evaluation and assessment, and working with school districts to develop plans. So 2 big things: ongoing support for educators to make sure they have the best training we can provide possible, and support for families. Think about that. So shorthanding that. The goals are the same as the goals for the blueprint, that we get our teachers trained, 100% of our elementary workforce by 2030, and that we achieve the goals that are in the blueprint. 90% of our students reading at level 2 or higher on the state assessment, and then 50% at 3 and 4. So the plan has required elements. I'll show you where those are in the plan so you understand what those are. But through the process of development, the advisory committee learned a lot from proposals from the universities and identified what's required in every center. So it's the guaranteed piece every center will offer. So the required components. We also said to the universities, you have expertise. You need to demonstrate to us how you're going to share that expertise across the entire state. So that's key. And the third thing, the component is unique needs. So we are recommending to you all to establish 7 centers, not 6. I can explain that if you have a question on it. So we can make sure that we have regionally distributed centers that support families and educators across the state with required resources, shared expertise from the universities, and that we are flexible so that the center at Hayes may look different than the center in Wyandotte County, for example. Okay? Catchment areas. You see in the plan, in the appendix, take you to the appendix, which is just after page 14, and it shows you the catchment areas. The committee analyzed the number of teachers, the number of students across the state, and organized catchment areas. So we have areas of responsibility, if you will, for each of the centers. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't serve families outside of their catchment area, but they are responsible, obligated, required to serve families and teachers in the catchment area. Resource allocation. We have a budget that I'll be glad to talk with you about. But the resource allocation is not the same for all. The centers all are serving catchment areas that have different needs. And so we need to be responsive and provide funding that actually meets the needs. And then impact measures. I hope we have a chance to go through those in some detail because this was the most important section in my mind. Chair Estes can verify, I think, to the committee. How are we going to be held accountable that this investment works, that we're meeting our targets, that we're moving forward? So on page 6, you'll see those impact measures, things that we need to do for teachers that are learning, pre-service teachers, things that we need to do for our teachers that are in the classroom, and how we'll know. We had a lot of conversation about how do we know the staff in the centers are qualified. And we can delve into that. So there's some options there because we want to make sure the people that are actually doing this work are trained in structured literacy, right? And then families. How are we going to measure our impact to help families? So let me pause there, Madam Chair, before we go on.
And do we have questions about page 6? Representative Schmoy.
All right, I was looking through this earlier and kind of trying to match this up with the bill from last year. And I really would like for you to just walk me through some of the how we're going to implement it, like what that actually looks like as far as what we're doing in the classrooms for teachers, because this looks like a lot of what we want to happen, but not the actual nuts and bolts of what are we actually looking at in the universities.
May I have permission to take you to page 8?
Yes.
All right, page 8. This is the required piece, and this is the what has to be done. Okay. Now, each university is now coming back to the advisory committee with explicit plans on the how. That process is happening over the next 2 weeks, but I can tell you what they're required to do. And that's what this implementation timeline is all about. So you can see for each of those impact measures, like on page 8, that's for pre-service. This is exactly what we're expecting to see happen. Exactly. And then the chart says this spring, you can build knowledge about what you need to do, but in the fall, you're starting to translate these requirements into action. So we have clearly articulated, the advisory committee has, what they want to see. So that next step is universities have to come forward and say, this requirement we're going to do this way. And they're starting to bring those plans forward next week. So we have one of those for everyone. You can just go from page 8 all the way through.
I'm going to jump in here because I kind of had some of the same questions. And I know I was like, let's not get into the progress report, but I'm going to get into page 5 of the progress report. On the very bottom statement, I thought that was a really good example of the types of things that I expected to see. The course alignment planning tool will do this, and I see much more how here, and when I look at the timeline statements, it doesn't give me as much how. And I have always wanted to see more of the how from that.
As a member of the advisory committee, Chair Estes, and you are on the special committee reviewing the university plans on the how, and that starts next week. So we can bring that forward. What you're seeing on page 8 of the progress report is specifically related to how we're going to address the comprehensive literacy assessment. So if this is the kind of detail the committee wants from the universities on how, we'll make sure that you have that. We'll make sure you have it.
I think that's important for us to have because in my mind, and you and I have had these conversations, all of the details surrounding the reading center are what I was expecting and hoping that we would get to. And I know we set an aggressive, not we because we were presented a bill, but an aggressive schedule was set to meet all of this. But I think we're in a once-in-a-lifetime kind of chance to do something very, very good. But if the universities are doing the reading centers and their plan isn't finished, then how are we saying we like the plan and because I feel like we're missing some of the hows. So I just want to be very transparent about my position on that.
May I respond?
You may.
So the process we used, I call top-down, bottom-up. So the committee designed a document sent out to the field to say, here's what we're trying to achieve, tell us how. Each university brought forward a plan, and we took what we thought was the best from all their plans and put it into this plan, right? So they're now in the process of realigning their plans to these requirements. So we'll have that how. Just needed a little more time, and I appreciate the acknowledgement that the timeline in the blueprint bill, it just was a short runway. Yeah.
Representative Brantley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think on this same line, I would appreciate seeing like the program review after it's been revised and those programs are submitted from each university of where the structured literacy is inserted, and maybe even to the point of what data points are used to evaluate that program, so we can kind of see what is used to show the effectiveness of that. I would appreciate that.
We can absolutely do that. Now, that's outside of the centers. That's another one of those branches, but we start that process in February, as you see in the report, and we'll bring that to you. I'd love to share that data.
Representative Steele?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Accountability is a big concern of mine with this, and the fact that you have a goal that's 8 years out is very concerning. So being able to see how we're measuring that so we can ensure our students are getting the reading that they need now, or I get the short timeline, but the 8 years, and so accountability for that is really important. If you have any data or trackers, yes, we're implementing this course at the university, and these, next year, then these kids are out teaching or student teaching or something would be great. And you mentioned earlier about you're looking for ways of how we can have the students when they're in the classroom, but then going out, like some kind of student teaching component or something. Just throwing this out there, are the Board of Regents willing to look at credit hours where student teachers are getting that? And being able to really be able to implement that with student teachers so that they're prepared and ready to take this to students.
Those are great
I'm going to
questions.
call on Dr. Flanders if you want to address that one, because I think that's a little bit more your lane, because I think some of that may be already happening at the universities. Which one of you would feel like that's your, I would say lane, but that's a little funny.
So I'd like for you to repeat that. So
Sure. I'm just curious, Dr. Lane was mentioning how you guys are trying to work together to have students be able to truly implement this and not just sit at a desk, so more like a student teaching, like a clinical type thing. Well, that takes credit hours. So is the Board of Regents looking at credit hours of what students who are in the education field needing to be able to truly meet that?
So it can take credit hours. It also can be assigned. The credit hours are you have to have a minimum number of hours.
Correct.
Per credit hour. So, I worry about charging students a lot more for the education, so we need to think about that. But we need to ensure that we're going to do what it takes to ensure that they get the skills necessary. So if there had to be additional clock hours of instruction onto a credit hour, we could do it that way, or we can look at adding more hours. The goal for us is to make sure that we have prepared teachers coming out.
Dr. Flanders, a certain amount of your universities are doing field experience within methods classes, or how is that happening? Do you know?
So go ahead.
Point to you, Representative Steele. Student teaching is already credit hour, right? So what I was talking about, we need something more than that, because that's about, for an elementary teacher, 5 subjects. And
that's
something
my
more.
concern,
Yes.
is that if we're adding more, this is crucial.
Yes.
This is crucial that our children read.
Yes.
And so that's where I was like, well, if you're adding and you're adding and you're taking and you're taking, where are we?
I think
Something doesn't really add up.
I believe we need to reshape.
Thank you.
That, not to require more hours to a good degree, but let's really examine what we're doing while in degree. All the universities are required to have a field experience under the accreditation that the state board oversees, so they all have that.
Okay, thank
Whether that's enough, that's the question.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Representative Schmoy.
Sorry, I feel like I'm taking all your time today. As far as the training in the centers themselves, approximately how much are we seeing that it's going to be like lab work, simulation, as opposed to how much is going to be hands-on with students in a classroom, real-life classroom?
The vision is a continuum, so I'm glad you brought up simulations, because that's not sit a teacher in front of some AI kind of experience. So the simulations will be kind of a gradual release of more faculty hands-on coaching to less in front of real children. The ultimate goal, I mean, if you're already a practicing educator, you want support to do that with your kids in your classroom. And so that the centers, let me just clarify, the centers sound like they're a place you have to go to. They will have a place, but they're charged to get out in that catchment area and come to schools, support school districts, be working with teachers in the classrooms.
Can I have a follow-up, Madam Chair?
You may, and thank you for asking.
Okay, thank you. So as far as the centers go, then we are looking more so at the regents, the people who are teaching the teachers are coming to the schools themselves and working with the teachers who are already teaching in classrooms, and they're going to universities and working with teachers who are learning to teach in classrooms. Are we doing both of those things at the same time?
That's a great clarification. The primary role of the centers with undergraduate programs, pre-service, is to support and help improve those undergraduate programs. The center's main focus are the teachers that are already in the classroom who need additional training. And it does not require that educator from one of your communities, not near a university, to travel to the university. The center staff go to the teachers.
Okay, thank you very much.
Representative Getz. Representative Getz, is your mic on?
I tapped it, but it didn't work. Sorry. Thank you. Did you hear that, or do I need to repeat it? The page 4, where it talks about how many teachers we're looking at that are in the classroom is how I read it, and we need to kind of re-educate the educator a little bit. And then I don't know if it is actually like the 2030 down there. Maybe my mind is just thinking, maybe that 2030 doesn't have anything to do with it in the end of the next paragraph, but what's the time frame and how many educators do you think you can get retrained in a year or 4 years or 5 years? What's our time frame to get everybody kind of on the same page?
I believe you're looking at the progress report when you
I am.
At page 4, which
Is
is fine.
Is this the progress report?
Oh, it's in my testimony. Okay.
Sorry.
That's right. It's in several places because it's an important topic. So that relates directly to the Foundations in Structured Literacy course that we're developing. And how you arrive at the numbers is that you look at how many teachers are in letters training that are due to complete and how many are not enrolled in letters at all. So that's that target number. About 1,500 educators a year we anticipate may choose the option of the Foundations course. So 1,500 a year. So you take who's trained in letters plus who's trained in the other offerings from the state board plus this course to get to our goal. All of those things add up. See, this is a true partnership there.
So is the 5,000 number right of kind of what are teachers who are out there? And I'm sorry if that's going off of a wrong number.
No, we have a chart back in the center's plan. Your third attachment has a chart called Structured Literacy Credential Needs, and it articulates by catchment area how many teachers we have, who's in training, et cetera. So that data, and that's how we got to that number.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Lane, again. I had just a little bit of question following up on the centers. On page 5, it talks about resource allocation and equity. And I have no idea, I'm not really trying to second guess your methodology of where, determining where centers are going to be at, but I'm looking at this and I'm not in very good shape, and I think I could ride my bike between the center at Washburn and KU. On the other hand, if I'm in Bird City or Johnson City, Hayes is a long ways away. Was that taken into consideration? And it seems like I remember some of this discussion that the centers would not necessarily have to be at universities with teacher programs. I mean, help me out a little bit on that.
Yeah, Representative Hill, you're absolutely right. The center that KU is proposing will actually be located in the Kansas City metro. But one of the things that each university will be doing, because there's the KU serving Johnson and Wyandotte County. So one of the things that each has to do is tell us, where are your physical locations? So Hayes is planning hubs, they call them hubs, partnerships with service centers and other locations where these kinds of services can be provided. Because you're right, we got to the math based on how many students are in the catchment area total, how many teachers. And Hayes, when you look at the catchment map, you go, oh my goodness, how are they going to do that? They have to have partners. Partnerships are a key piece to this. This is not public universities doing this on their own. So they're talking with partners such as independent colleges, service centers, and they are identifying the outpost, if you will. So if Hayes has a center located on the campus, where else will Hayes have centers located throughout their catchment? That's how we're getting to that.
So there will actually be more hands-on
Yes.
training centers than just the 7 that are shown on our map? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I anticipate, and I know I've been in conversation with the Hayes folks, that their plan includes service centers to be actually partnering to do the work. So yes, there'll be multiple locations. That issue of, I responded to Representative Smo, it is get to the clientele. It is not come to. I mean, we had a come to model, right? The Center of Reading in Pittsburgh, Kansas has been in place for 30 years, focused on working with children with dyslexia.
I think this question is a great example of why we need a more complete plan in front of us, so we have a better understanding of what we're funding. I have always wanted, I know you're aware, I've always wanted much more detail, and I think these are, for the amount of investment that we're making, I think we all need to know a greater level of detail. I will go to Representative Brantley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I need maybe more of a clarification. In my experience so far, many districts within our state have already implemented the letters training, and a lot of their staff are already trained. Are they considered centers then, where the students can go there rather than travel to the university when they have it right in their own backyard as their center where they can go get the experience with using letters and structured literacy right there in their own district? Second thing I ask, on buy-in from university professors, in districts, they're training all staff. Will the university be training all their staff that are involved with teacher education pieces so that they all understand how to teach reading in their piece also?
Both questions are right on point. So school districts and schools who have all their staff have gone through letters and are implementing it could absolutely be a partner like a lab school where others can learn. That's how building this in partnership with each other, that's why that's so important. So that, yes, that can be done. In terms of training of all faculty, the strategic planning process that the advisory committee is now undertaking will have deep conversations, and we're starting those, about all faculty having qualifications in structured literacy. So we'll be working through that. I anticipate I have an answer for you directly by April.
Thank you. I guess my main thought process here is you've got experienced educators out in the field that are actually engaged in this process right now. I'm not sure how many districts, I know there's a lot of teachers that are taking letters training, and it's quite long, but they actually have that experience right now. It would be an immediate place where the students, the candidate, could actually go and have that training rather than waiting for these centers to pop up.
You're right, and one of the things for the teacher candidates, pre-service teachers, that we need to ensure is that they are paired with a teacher who's already gone through this training. That's not currently the case in some situations, but that's really important for us to focus on. And you can see by catchment area, we provided that chart for you in the appendix, how many teachers have been in training in what areas. Those are great points, thank you.
I think that goes to part of the bill that talks about the cooperation and that needs to happen so that everything that we have to leverage gets leveraged. And there are things I'd like to see, but we are going to run out of time. So I noticed that your page 7 is basically a description of your different categories. So you want to go straight to page 8?
So the charts on page 8, 9, 10, and 11 are all those required elements. The what has to be done in each center, broken out by area. So you see on page 8 what the centers will do to support pre-service. On 9, page 9, in-service. Page 10, it's about assessment and outreach and partnerships and families. And then page 11 is what the KBOR Office of Literacy will be obligated to do for centers. So that's how this plays out.
Do we have questions for Dr. Lane on some of these? And while y'all are thinking, I'm going to start with my first one because I think I might be the person most interested in what a simulation looks like. When a simulation is occurring, who is the teacher actually teaching? Is it a live child or something that is computer generated?
Great question. You'll see the definition on page 8 and 9 of simulation. And one of the things, Chair Estes, I recommend this body might consider in refining in the bill, so we have a clear definition of what we mean by simulation. The advisory committee has outlined this. It's not about working with artificial children, AI generated. It's that continuum I mentioned earlier. A simulation can be I'm practicing outside of my classroom, the faculty members coaching me, or the simulation could be I have a whole class of children at the center I'm working with and getting coaching. It's a right. Could be some software where I see it, another instructor engaged in the work, and I'm critiquing it. But it is not working with artificial intelligence-generated children. This is an area that we're working on to make sure all the universities understand what we're looking for, and a great place where you could assist in refining that. The idea behind the simulations, and I don't think it's the right word, is to create opportunities for educators to practice and get coaching, like you do with nurses or other professions. Give them an opportunity to practice with coaching and support them in the classroom. So the simulation word may not be the right word, but it's not about artificial intelligence. Be glad to.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one quick question about the impact. Kind of like Representative Hill mentioned earlier that we wait, in 2014, we find out about structured literacy and then we have 10 years lapse. To make sure that we don't have a lapse and only use state assessments as our mode of assessment to know if it's working, is there any type of benchmarking, progress monitoring assessment that's embedded into this, that the candidates can get the experience, two-way experience, and also show that what we're doing is working and not just an end product, oh, it didn't work, and now what do we do?
Right, and we cannot wait to look at how we're doing as we get close to 2033, right? So it's an important point. So in conversation with Commissioner Watson about how we might benchmark the actual performance of children in classrooms, because that data is not data higher ed has, but we need to create a partnership there. Second, in the progress report, you'll see a section on developing and ensuring that teachers are trained on how to use diagnostic and formative assessments in pre-service. That also will help us get to that. So that those are the tools that you use, as you know, every day in a classroom to say, how's little Cindy doing? Is she making progress? How do I adjust my instruction? So those tools are currently available, but we are not consistently utilizing them in teacher prep.
Thank you. I think that was kind of my concern, that if we're going to move to a progress monitoring, benchmarking assessment that we're going to use with the candidates, that we are more unified so that when I am prepared with this assessment piece, I know how to use it when I go to the field. Absolutely. And more unified across the board. Thank you.
Great questions. Any more questions? All right. I do have another one. When I went back and reconciled, or not reconciled, really refreshed my memory on what the bills said, one of the things that the bill said that they would do, and I had to pull it up on my computer, was to help districts make individual plans for students and provide evaluations.
Yes.
And I see those concepts referenced in the plan, but I don't see anything that is telling us how that is going to happen. And so that, and in case you want to look later, any of you, that is page 7 of Senate Bill 438 that we looked, and that's C1 and 2.
I feel like, Madam Chair, I'm glad you brought that up, but just to tell you, I don't need to look later because I think that this bill is just all I dream about, so I'm very familiar. We are asking the Center for Reading at Pittsburgh State to be a key partner in this work. They have the expertise in evaluation assessment and developing plans for struggling readers. They're going to be supporting all the centers so that we have the expertise, we develop that to do the work in partnership with our school districts. So we can articulate more of that how for you in a revision of this plan.
Thank you, and that's why I think this discussion is very valuable. We all have a better understanding of what we want to see, because if you watched Tuesday, like it seems like you might have, I very much see that we have sections and we're all trying to get where we do the same thing, and that's hard because we're very rarely all together, and that's my favorite thing about the task force. Are there any other questions about these pages on the plan? All right, then we'll move on.
Page 12, I believe, Madam Chair.
We will move on to, do you want to say anything about pages 12?
I think this is an important point. The process was opened up to all universities and that had an educator preparation program. The ones on this list are the ones that actually put forward a plan and are now revising. But their plan has not been authorized until the details come back to the advisory committee. And then it would be helpful, we can talk later about a timeline to bring that back to this committee. So we've tentatively identified who the leads are for the centers, but they have not been awarded a grant to do the work until they revise their plan. We start that review with them next week. Okay. Now, I might also add one more thing. Why 7? The bill says 6. The Center of Reading at Pittsburgh has been in place, as I said, for a long time, 30 years. They've done the evaluation side of this with struggling readers. We're adding the 7th so they can expand to do the education prep part and also ensure that we have resources across the state. So that's why the plan says 7, not 6.
Thank you. So do we have questions related to page 12? Representative Norton, you may go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Dr. Hill, just that you're talking about collaborating and doing all this stuff. So, but is each one of these centers coming up with a separate plan, or is this something that you're as the boss, going to tell them this is how we're doing it? I mean, or are we going to spend more time rehashing and hashing and never get to start to teach our teachers? I mean, where are we?
Thank you for that. No, those indicators on the what, they're required. There's required. What is flexible is, for example, K-State has expertise in working with children that speak other languages. They're going to help, that's that shared expertise piece. So the required components on this timeline, everybody, it's the reliable part that we can be assured everyone's doing this. Expertise varies based on your university. That's going to be shared. And then if there are some unique needs, I mean, take us back to Hayes. They need additional resources because their land mass is so big. Then that'll be different. But highly structured so that when you say Center of Excellence in Literacy in Kansas, you all know, communities know, the families know exactly what they do.
You may follow up.
And it's all the same, basically, except for some of the specific or.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You'll see that in their plans when we bring them forward to you.
Are there additional questions? Representative Wolf.
Thank you. I just have a question. It's not a popular or fun question, but so we have our teachers and we've trained them and they're not getting it. How long do we continue to keep training them if some of them just aren't in the right field or if they just aren't progressing or leading their students the way they need to? Do we have something that fixes that? I mean, is there a way to protect against a classroom that doesn't have the teacher it needs?
Complicated answer. Our role is to support the schools and school districts, so we will continue to provide resources and support to that building principal and that teacher until the building principal makes the decision they need to make.
I'll just jump in here with that's really beyond what falls under the purview of a task force because how long you keep an employee is really up to the employer. But I think I understand where you're coming from. We want the best and the brightest teaching our best and our brightest, but it just really doesn't fall under there. Representative Pishny.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick question, kind of related to that, but also related to one that Representative Hill asked earlier. I'm one that wants to reward top performance and not mediocre performance. So just taking it from a school standpoint, and I think you said something about so many are failing in reading, what that percentage was. I don't recall what you said just a little bit ago. But is one of the measurements for success of this is that number, and I think Representative Hill said let's get it down to 3% or something. Is that one of the measurements that's going to tell us whether this is successful or not? That's not to the individual teacher standpoint necessarily, but how are we going to know that we're successful? And maybe that's in some of this stuff that I haven't read yet, but how do we know? How do we, and then what are we doing to reward the success and not reward mediocrity?
Let me deal with the first.
Sure.
Thank you for the question. The first part of that question, that benchmarking, let me back up. The 30% is your goal says that by 2033, 90% of Kansas children will be reading at a level 2 on the state assessment or higher. So that 30% should be down to 10. Now, we want it to be as near to all as possible. What we have to do in the strategic plan process, working with our State Department of Ed, is create that benchmarking so that we know where do we need to be by, what year is this, 2025? Where do we need to be by 2027? Where do we need to be? So we can progress. Are we making a difference? If not, we need to make a change.
Madam Chair, with your permission, just a quick follow-up. And then how are the factors, and maybe this is up to each individual center or institution, so I may be out of my lane here just for a second, going to take into account the variances between among school districts? For example, in my local community, I think the number right now is about 25 different languages represented in our high school. And so that's going to be a different scenario than over in Olathe School District, for example, where my grandkids are. So is that factored into some of this criteria that you're referencing?
Yes, that's an excellent point. And that's that unique need. So there's required elements, there's shared expertise, and then the unique needs. So we need to know what those are through a deep analysis each center will do to say, in this community, they need X, whatever that is, to address the needs of their community and their children. So some of it is absolutely the same, but we also have to be aware that we're not all the same across the state. So we have to build in that unique needs piece.
I have people in the pipeline, which is why I do appreciate when people ask permission to ask a follow-up, because I'm trying to do my best to parse out the time as effectively as I can. I have a question from Representative Hill and Representative Wolf. If nobody else has questions on this section, when Representative Wolf is done, we'll move on to my least favorite part, which is the budget. There we go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I appreciate your report, and I appreciate the progress that has been made. I think you mentioned to us that programs have been changed in all the universities. Is that correct?
Undergraduate programs, yes.
The undergraduate programs. So that takes into account the teachers that are in the pipeline being trained right now. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you have put before us a sheet that talks about how many people are currently being trained in the field. Okay, and on this is, it's on page that doesn't have a number. It's the page that doesn't have a number, number 2.
I think it's actually number 3, but it's in your attachment after the plan. It's called Structured Literacy Credential Needs.
Yes, so we have statewide, we have 18,700 approximately teachers that need to be trained. We have a total that are remaining to need to be trained of 5,237 teachers. Okay? I didn't pull my calculator out. I'm thinking that's about 30% of all the teachers. The appropriation last year was about $10 million.
Yes.
That equals out to about $2,000 per teacher that has not been trained.
Yes.
And in addition to the other things we talked about, the new assessment is in place for new teachers. Is that correct?
There's a new performance assessment.
The praxis,
Oh, yes, that's under the umbrella of the state board.
that has been put in place by the state board. So that keeps teachers out of the field that do not have training, new teachers. Is that correct?
Pass the test.
Okay.
That's correct.
What you need to explain to me is, I mean, I think part of this is you're already doing a job. It's, you know, one of those things when you work yourself out of a job, right? And the field is very, for the most part, when I go around and talk to people, the field is very much on board with letters training or structured literacy training. I mean, this is sweeping our state.
Yes.
And I'm looking at that number that is left to be trained and the relative cost of that. And, you know, the question comes to me is, why aren't we doing a $2,000 scholarship to every teacher that needs to be trained yet? And what is your role in anything more than that? Thank you.
I really appreciate that question. In the budget, in the progress report, you'll see those numbers. You're really good with math, Representative Hill, because it's about $1,800 per teacher to pay the tuition for the new course that the universities have developed. And the idea is to provide that to those 5,000 and more. And it has the coaching component. So we are partnering with KSDE to make sure that we wisely use our resources to target those who may choose, for whatever reason, not to do letters, right? The other thing to think about, this is not a one and done. This is an ongoing, deep, professional development piece that we need, like we require in other professions to keep going back and learn. So we make sure we never see again a gap between what the science tells us and how we're trained. So it's ongoing. So I see it as an investment in the current need to fill the void that we currently have, but also to make sure that we don't get in this place again in Kansas.
Representative Wolf.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just want to say, so that I'm not mistaken for what I said before, I work with some of the best teachers that are amazing. And I would love to see them be able to implement some of these things and be rewarded for the hard work that they put in and that they do every single day. At the same time, we do not want to see kids left behind. And it is happening. And part of that is there's just not enough people. You have classrooms of many with high needs. What do we do to help some of that stuff too, where you have 17, 18, 19 with one teacher and you just can't possibly reach out to them and help them with all the needs there are there. So along with this plan, we need to make sure that we have enough staff that can handle getting us where we need to be.
You're describing that we're looking at the tip of the iceberg of what we need to do, but there's so much more. So I thank you for that. We need to keep going, solve these problems, and there are many.
Thank you. And I think that's why I feel we need to be kind of that focal point that brings a lot of these things together. I know Dr. Lane and the task force are trying to do that together, but there are times that we have to make legislative changes. We need to make sure that we're including local school boards and administrators and everybody for this conversation. But I think Dr. Hill's question, because you called yourself a farm boy, I'm going to call you Dr. Hill. But anyway, I think that it's important. His question illustrates to me the importance of all the hows to be there, because that part of intervening and helping children that in my own mind, I've coined the term who are in literacy distress or crisis is really, really important. And if that doesn't show through the plan on all the things we do, and more specifically and robustly how we're doing them, I fear that we will not have the support to do what we need to do. And I know you and I spoke about defining a couple of terms in the bill. Maybe we need to look at timeline, and I really would like everybody's input. And I was going to go to the budget. It's there in front of you. Dr. Hill kind of got into it, but I'm going to kind of switch gears and go to, I'd like each person here at this table to tell Dr. Lane what you would like to see different. And if there's nothing you see different, maybe your favorite thing, and we don't have very long, so this is going to be like a speed dating round. But I think it's very important that each of us have a voice in saying to the task force what we need and what we appreciate about this. So I'm going to start with Representative Miller, and we will just continue around, and I'm not going to waste time on calling on you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hate going first, but I will be happy to do it. I really am impressed with the work that you've done and the what we've found from these studies. And honestly, I just look forward to continuing to learn more about how we can actually improve literacy in the state so we can possibly be maybe a beacon of hope for the rest of the country. So thank you very much.
I really appreciate the implementation timeline. It's just, I love how it's laid out with, learning, implementing, excelling. That's great.
That star goes to my colleague, so thank you for that.
I don't have any specific items for improvement or concern, but I do appreciate the collaboration between the State Board and KBOR. It's so critical to train the teachers and then ensure they're teaching correctly in the classroom. And it sounds like the plan is trying to pull those pieces together so that there is follow-up. The teachers aren't just left out there trying to wing it a little bit after they've gotten trained. So I really appreciate that method. I would make one comment, and maybe there was a little bit of confusion I was sensing, that structured literacy didn't start in 2014. That was a term that was coined by the International Dyslexia Association. It uses principles from what's called Orton-Gillingham, which was 100 years ago, and it's brought forward. So structured literacy's been around a long time, and I didn't want to give or leave the impression that this was a brand new program. We're going to try something else that, like reading recovery, was not too successful. So anyway, I just make that comment.
Look forward to having you on my team.
Boy, look at the time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess the phrase that's in my mind about all this, which is, it's excellent work, it's hard work, it's something, to me, brings me back to a phrase that kind of guides me, is pay attention to the tension. And you have a tension here with children who can't read. And to pay attention to that gets me to a next thing of, I just hope we are thinking around mitigating bad pace, because the pace that we go at for this, I liked your long-term, like, hey, we got a lot of stuff, we got to keep this going as well as get this started. And it'd be great for a long time for it really to get the fruits that everybody talking about it right now wants it to get. So just ways that we're not going too fast, but we're also not going too slow. And I think that's a bit of the tension that's in the room today of, hurry up, have a plan, but don't have the wrong plan. So thank you for how you're working on it. And I think we're all wrestling with that of, yeah, maybe we missed some things or could have done some things different, but that's, in a sense, that's the past. And what can we do about that now? So thank you for what you're doing about it now. And I also I appreciate the top down, bottom up, that here's the idea, we got to make this happen. What's the great ideas, and bring those out of all the great educators in our state. So thank you for both of those things.
Thank you.
Well, first, it's good to see you again. And I'll keep mine simple. I'm waiting for the results. So when that student comes to me later, I can see some change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm very enthused about what I hear, but I think we need to address a basic structural problem before we can fully address this issue. And that problem is, we need to know why and how to fix the fact that we were 1,800 teachers short last year and 1,900 teachers short this year, apparently. That's a basic problem. If you don't have the number of teachers that you need and you have higher class sizes, that hinders the whole process. And so I think we really need to take a look at that and how we can address that over the next 2 years. The other thing is that I think it's great to talk about rewarding teachers, but again, you have in my district where in Shawnee Mission, what might be considered a successful teacher is one that takes a student from the regular curriculum into AP courses. In some other districts, a successful teacher might just get a kid to come to school. So I really, when you're judging successful teachers, that's a tricky thing and a slippery slope. So I want to make sure that, that teacher that works their tail off to just get that kid to school and stay in school, that's a successful teacher in some parts of our state. And we can't forget those people. And just old school stuff here, I think it was a horrible mistake to give kids tablets until they're at least in 4th grade. And I think tablets at the lower elementary level, which I taught for 7 years, is just a mistake. They look at those tablets, and I think, in a lot of my opinion, as toys. And that's what they do with them at home. They play games with them, all that sort of thing. And I know this is Harris. I'd go back to notebooks, or I'd go back to workbooks. And I know that sounds funny, and I know it sounds like I'm 170 years old, and I'm only 160 years old. But I think that is well worth looking at. And I'd like to see some statistics. If we would go back to something like that, how important would that be? How successful would that be compared to kids that are just working on tablets or just working on electronic tablets?
If I may, Madam Chair, you may ask that question to Commissioner Watson because the state board just passed a policy encouraging less technology devices in schools. He has those details.
Yeah, and I was president of the Technology Association for all the technology companies in Kansas and Missouri for 8 years, so I'm a big tech guy.
And Jerry, I'm going to be old-fashioned and Representative Stockdale, I'm going to be old-fashioned and point out that I have seven people left in 4.5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Lane, for the work you and your staff have done. I think this is a great program we need to implement. Back to what my former representative, it's, to me, I know you're following the plan we gave you, but I'm not used to government operations, and I think the sooner the better. You know, we're talking 8 years before we're done, and that, to me, we're 30,000 plus students per class that we're failing on, or could be failing, and have been failing. So I just, the quicker the better, the more we can do it. I know my former rep, we need to do it right, but the more we can get this going, the quicker we can get it going, the better off we are.
Thank you, Dr. Lane. It's a lot of work to put this together. Accountability and benchmarks is not in any of this, and it would really be nice to have that quicker, sooner. Thank you.
I hope April's quicker, sooner. We'll try. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Lane, for coming. I guess one thing that I really want to just keep an awareness of is you almost have a Center 8 if you look at all of the school districts out in the field that are implementing, and I've actually seen the letters implemented in the classrooms, and that would be a great tool. Along with talking about the budget piece, I know last summer, I believe the last cohort was put through that's being paid for. So we'll maybe looking at providing teachers the resource to not have to pay for this on their own behalf.
May I respond just quickly?
No, I'm just, we are so close to out of town. I know, out of time, I know what you're saying because that's actually in there, but I'll let the two of you follow up later. In fairness to everybody, I need to zip through.
Thank you again, Dr. Lane. I've talked quite a lot, so I don't need to say too much more, but it's an amazing, one of the things about us as human beings is that we're great at predicting the future in the rearview mirror. And I think the challenge we've got before us right now is not nearly so much as getting the idea of structured literacy distributed amongst the state. I think we're very close to having that done. I think the changes that we need to be looking at is how in-service is going to continue to enhance that. And a lot of that comes down to the universities providing the correct resources, the state board requiring the correct resources, and it's not nearly so much as developing a plan as it is implementing a plan. Thank you very much.
I guess the only concerns I really had was just the accountability and again, just the benchmarks to, I mean, going 8 years is a long period of time without having any progress reports to see if this is actually producing the results we want to see or if we're not producing those results. So that'd be something and even as like with the teachers that are already trained in letters, is there any preliminary data as far as how that's working with those particular teachers? It'd be something I'd like to see.
In the interest of time, I'll let Dr. Lane follow up with you.
Yes, I'm just excited that I get to be on this committee to be able to enrich and help our students and our teachers both, because this is something I believe they both want.
Thank you, Dr. Lane. You've answered all kinds of questions from me today. My biggest, as you know, is the nuts and bolts. How is it being implemented? What does that actually look like in the teacher classroom? And then what it looks like in the student classroom that the teachers are going into, including what the observation and assessment entails as far as when they're in the actual classroom in our districts and they're being observed and assessed, what all components go into that so that we can make sure that we have benchmarks that we are following along in our own districts. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you all. I think I'm not going to repeat myself. I think you've heard what I've had to say. I will tell the committee, first of all, a question to our technology expert there. Was Representative Hubert online during the meeting? Do you know if Representative, because Michelle has to take attendance, and I only excuse people who let me know beforehand that they are not going to be here. Was he present online? He was not. Okay, thank you. Dr. Lane, thank you for coming. Committee, you may feel like you need a good old rest after this. Committee, on Tuesday, we have Dr. Watson, and he's going to talk to you about what the State Board of Ed is doing to address literacy. And you need everybody doing everything they can to address literacy, and at some point, it needs to weave together. And that's why I am looking for much more specific information out of the plan. That's me personally. You guys may have felt like you heard enough. That's for you. That's your decision to decide. But when we have his testimony, we'll get it out. We're trying to do our best to get everything out to you at least 24 hours ahead. And I can tell who read their homework. So thank you guys very much for a wonderful meeting. Michelle, thank you for getting us everything that we needed. You're adjourned.